All right, let's fucking do this. Fourth, Fred on film, Fred Asquith on film. Welcome. This is a podcast starring me, Fred Asquith, and I'm talking on film brackets and TV. You can watch it on YouTube. If you're already watching on there, thank you. Go have a listen on Spotify, Apple Music. And if you're listening on Spotify, I always say Apple Music, Spotify or Apple Podcasts, go watch it on YouTube. You won't be able to see that I'm sat on a giant orange sofa with a fucking neon sign that's not turned on this time, forgotten. And I've got the biggest bottle of juice you could ever imagine. It's a refilled 1.5 litre bottle of Volvic. And I've refilled this fucker 3 times today because it's boiling hot, okay? I'm also putting the camera a bit closer today, you might notice. Just seeing what the vibes are there. Yeah, it's boiling hot, and I think that's deep down why I haven't turned the neon sign on. It just feels like there's a lot of light, you know? There's a lot of light, and there's a lot of heat, and I don't want any extra electronic appliances pushing heat into this room. So that's the intro out of the way. Okay. So we're going to talk today about long movies, because I forgot to talk about long movies last time. We're also going to talk some news. There's some exciting news that's been coming out in the trades. We're going to talk about upcoming premieres. I'm going to 2 premieres coming up. Can you guess which ones, guys? And then we're going to do the FOFSCARS. Woohoo! Last week we started this new segment called the FOFSCARS, where we awarded alternative awards to Danny Boyle's filmography. And this, because in light of 28 years coming soon. And this week we're going to do Brad Pitt's filmography, because the week after 28 years, F1 comes out. Okay. And then it's Jurassic World, so in the future we might do Scarlett Johansson and all this. Anyway, let's crack on. Speaking of Danny Boyle, I heard some news that he was originally planning a Sunshine trilogy. Sunshine is the Danny Boyle film that I picked as my most rewatchable Danny Boyle film in the FOFSCARS last week. And then I saw this article like, oh yeah, we originally planned a trilogy. And I was like, for anyone who's seen Sunshine, that should strike them as something completely fucking ridiculous. Because I haven't seen it in a few years, but if my memory serves me correct, at the end of the film, Cillian Murphy and the entire ship is engulfed by the sun, right? After a deadly battle with a fucking like crazed ex-passenger of another ship. Like, what the fuck was the sequel gonna be? Like, they kind of do the mission and everything is gone. Like, cosmically gone. Like, what is the sequel? Just blackness for 3 hours? What? 3 hours. Now, that would be a long sequel. We'll come on to long movies in a second. I also want to just do a note for... I bigged up the fact that I'm excited for The Materialists to come out, which is a new rom-com from Celine Song with Dakota Johnson, Pedro Pascal, and Chris Evans. And I was talking in a previous episode about how I'm so excited that might spur on a regeneration of the rom-com genre, and we might have like a kind of semi-peak of the rom-com genre. Let me just put my phone on Do Not Disturb there. We might have a little peak of the rom-com genre, similar to how recently we've had a horror peak, right? It might just like come back and like reestablish itself. Who the fuck knows? You know, it's blue sky thinking, guys. And I just wanted to make a note that Materialist is out in America. And I don't know why, but this year there's a lot more mismatched release dates between the US and the UK than usual. I don't know what's happening there. The strike was a couple of years ago. I don't know why that would even be related, but I'm just literally grasping at straws as to like, why would this happen more this year? So it's happening with The Materialists. It's happening with Bring Her Back, I think it's called, which is the follow-up to Talk to Me by the Philippou brothers. And Talk to Me is, I think, my favourite horror film of all time. And Bring Her Back's been out in the US for a month or so, and it's not coming out in the UK for another couple of months. And then we've got Eddington, the Ari Aster film, another 3-hour-long movie, which we'll come on to. That's out in the US, I think, in the next week or two. And it's not out in the UK for another couple of months. And this is a phenomenon that, if you're a similar age to me, I'm 32. It's a phenomenon that like we used to have a lot when we were younger, right? Like it used to be like sometimes even big films. You'd be like, oh yeah, American are getting it like a week before us or 2 weeks before us. What the fuck why is this happening again? Can someone answer me that question? That's a legitimate question. Why are they doing this again? I don't see the need for it. So anyway, most of the time when I'm anticipating a film, like say 28 Years, for example, I don't want to see reaction reviews or even trailers like we've discussed. In the case of the Materialists, I don't mind personally seeing reactions because I'm not wedded to the end result of it. I'm more wedded to the wider picture about rom-coms. Like I think I'll enjoy it, but like it's not a film that I think could be spoiled for me personally. So I've gone and looked at the Rotten Tomatoes audience scores and critic scores for the American release. And if you don't want to hear anything about that, skip forward literally 1 minute from now. Okay? Gone? Right. So Rotten Tomatoes, it's got 88% critic score, The Materialists, and 78% audience score, which I guess all in all is just positive. And just to say that, like, my hope and predictions for the rom-com genre might come true. You know, Pedro Pascal has got massive star power. Massive! More than Paul Mescal, more than Andrew Scott. I don't know why I'm using them as his contemporaries, but, like, it just feels like those, like, what do they call them? Internet daddies, right? Like Tom Hardy and, like, just that kind of cohort of guys that people are enjoying right now. And I think Pedro's the kind of top of that pile. Anyway, so I really think it could do something, The Materialist. At least culturally. At least in terms of some banging actors on actors variety videos on YouTube, you know. Anyway, thinking about The Materialist again, I realised off the back of my chat about rom-coms a couple of weeks ago, which was suggesting rom-coms are going to have a horror-esque resurgence off the back of Materialists, that actually the reason why that might not happen, if I was to play devil's avocado, is the problem is IP in rom-coms, right? And that's something that rom-coms will never have, is IP, repeatable ideas. And that's what horror does have. You can get a horror idea really cheap and then repeat it. For example, the Terrifier series. You know, what are we on? Terrifier 3? And they're banging those films out. We've got, all the fucking 5 Paranormal Activity films and all this. You can repeat a horror film because if the people die at the end, just get new people. And it's almost more interesting for new people to be experiencing the same horror, right? Because you know what's coming. In a rom-com, by definition, a rom-com cannot have a cliffhanger ending. And by definition, if a rom-com is a rom-com, 99.9% of the time, they end up together at the end of the film. And so why would you have a sequel? Like, there aren't many rom-coms that, like, tonally would justify a sequel about the same characters. And obviously they've tried with, say, Miss Congeniality 2, Legally Blonde 2, you know, these kind of ones that are like based around a sole character, like that. They're like rom-coms that are not sort of relationship. They don't revolve purely around the relationship, right? You know, Legally Blonde, who does she end up with at the end of Legally Blonde? I don't think it's anyone, right? I think it was quite progressive that she was on her own, or maybe there was. Anyway, that is kind of the point, that Legally Blonde was about the Reese Witherspoon character more than it was about the relationship, but it was still a rom-com. So you can sequelize those things, but they weren't very good, right? I don't even think I saw Legally Blonde 2, but I can pretty much safely say it probably wasn't very good based on like the cultural impact of that film. And the only one I could think of was like The Breakup with Jennifer Aniston and Vince Vaughn, which I think is a really decent rom-com actually. That probably could have had a sequel. Like, that's 1 in a million that could have had a sequel. Because the only other ones you can think of actually are not quite rom-coms like we discussed before. They're more like crass comedies. So it's more like Wedding Crashers, 40-Year-Old Virgin. Like, maybe, you know, they could have had sequels. But that brought me on to my other point, which is actually the way they used to sequelize rom-coms and make them bankable properties is actually by sequelizing the actors, right? And not the characters. So you'd have multiple rom-coms starring Tom Hanks and Meg Ryan, or starring Kate Hudson and Matthew McConaughey. What did they do? How to Lose a Guy in 10 Days, really good one. Fool's Gold, not so good. Did they do a third one? And then my favourite combination, is it my favourite? Yeah, I'd say it's my favourite. Adam Sandler and Drew Barrymore, they did Wedding Crashers, 51st Dates, and again, did they do another one? It almost feels like the spectre of these couples are bigger than the amount of films they did. Like, maybe they did just do 2, but Sandler and Barrymore feels like quite a power pairing. Anyway, we should go back to that. We should go back to finding kind of 2 lead actors with chemistry in a rom-com environment and using them again, right? It's almost like a comedic chemistry that you find, I don't know, I'm not a massive fan of this, but you know when Dwayne Johnson and Kevin Hart were shipping around different comedies over and over and over again, like The Central Intelligence, Jumanji, over and over and over. People like, it is quite bankable to repeat actors together rather than characters, rather than storylines, which I'm not reinventing the wheel saying that, but I do think that it's not utilized as much as it could be nowadays, because I think that was more part of the studio system back in the day. Like, oh, you liked these 2, let's get them back together, you know. So I think we should do that more. We should find, you know, young, up-and-coming, attractive people. I'm going to come on to talk about Patrick Schwarzenegger later in The White Lotus. You know, someone like that, Sydney Sweeney, get them in rom-coms together. Like, and, you know, we used to shit out rom-coms, hundreds and hundreds of them, and then you would find a combination that works. Like, who knew Drew Barrymore and Adam Sandler would work? But once you find it, you repeat it, and that's the IP of rom-coms. It's like the same people in the same genre, but different characters, different scenario. And that's what I think how the rom-com genre could come back. That's my theory. That's my hope. Yeah, so I want to talk about super long films because I trailed that in the intro of the last episode and I didn't actually get to it because I talked about the assassination of Jesse James by the coward Robert Ford, right? And I was going to go on to talk about how long that film is. I think it's 2 hours 20 to 2 hours 30-ish, right? So it's long, but it made me think, oh, remember a time when I thought that was super long, like a 2 hour 30 film. When it came out, 2007, up-and-coming movie nerd, was like, bloody hell, that's a long one. Like, wow, it's almost brought with it a level of prestige to be a long film. Now, a 2 hour 30 to 3 hour film is common, and not just in arty movies. I would consider Assassination of Jesse James like an artful movie. But in auteur movies as well, so like Chris Nolan with Oppenheimer, Tarantino with Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, like these are all long, like big directors making artful movies that are also long. And then, but also commercial movies, right? So like Endgame, Mission Impossible, Wicked, like these are all like 3 hour movies. Giant budgets, commercial, mainstream, often hits, right? But that just hit me as like, oh, we've kind of been like continually coaxed into this comfort zone of like an over 2 hour movie is certainly the norm, and an over 2 hour 30 movie is apparently acceptable. And not only acceptable, but bankable, or that's something almost preferable by the studios, which then got me thinking more, right? Why is it that the industry is so focused on like financial efficiency? So like, how can we make sure that this movie is bankable? How can we make sure we make our money back? The movie industry's failing, the studio system, the cinema system, you know, these infrastructures of the economy of cinema, that they're failing, and how can we make sure that we remain solvent, right? That's the whole vibe of like, oh, a couple of years ago we were talking about, you know, in the aftermath of COVID, or even before COVID, we were talking about, you know, are movies dead? Is this industry going to be able to financially survive, right? So hear me out. Why is it then that over 2 hour 30 movies are not only very common, but in some cases the norm, and for the most expensive movies? So you think about the Mission movie, right? And how much that cost. I know that it cost so much because it was filmed through COVID and they had to reshoot and things like that. But let's just okay, we can use a different example. Let's use Wicked, right? Or Endgame, right? Any of those examples. By making the movie 3 hours, you by definition make the movie more expensive to make. And that's not a small fish. That's not a small fry thing, right? That's, when producers cost up the budget, they're almost literally doing this page by page by page. It's almost like you can be like, okay, per page, we're spending like 10 million, 5 million, that kind of thing, right? I'm just pulling figures out my arse here, but I'm saying that time costs money, right? Because for every new page, you might need more props, locations, reshoots, staff, production costs, crew, and all these things. And so, by definition, making a film longer makes it more expensive to make. So when you're talking about a Mission Final Reckoning that costs 400 million to make, again, put out of your mind the COVID obstacles, maybe that was a 3 hour movie. Maybe a 2 hour Final Reckoning movie might have cost, I don't know, 350 million conservatively, or 300 million, right? So then the studio's saving money, and it's more likely that film's going to make its money back at the box office. Because we all know, for some reason, this is now in the public consciousness that like a movie has to make double its budget in order to make its money back, because you have to account for like marketing and whatnot, which for some reason isn't quoted in the budget. So by removing 50 million off the budget, you might actually remove 100 million off the target box office. So why is it that it feels like it's the norm? Because the movie industry is apparently teetering on the edge. It's apparently going to go bust. Why would studios not? Why are studios so willing to cut out the mid-budget movies? Like, we're only going to make the tentpole movies that are going to make us money, or tiny weeny Blumhouse productions that are going to make us shitloads of money, right? So they cut out the mid-budget ones. They're now on telly. Why is it then, if they're so cutthroat about that, and they're so cutthroat about residuals and how can we pay you after the fact once we know how much it makes at the box office, things like this, why would they not be cutthroat about runtime? Isn't that amazing? Isn't that fucking weird? Like, isn't that weird that the whole film industry is kind of based off this tradition of like the producers sat behind the editor with a big stick being like, oh, cut this, cut that, and cut this, and you have to send your movie off for, if you're working with a studio, some studios are really harsh about what you should cut and this and that. We've all heard these stories, right? Directors having director's cuts in order to get what they actually wanted into people's homes. Where the fuck has that gone? Where the fuck has the culture gone of studios actually putting their foot down and cutting the time down? Which makes me think it can't be on their remit of notes and edits to make. But why? Why aren't studios going to directors and saying, yeah, this is a great script, but it's fucking 180 pages, get it down to 120 and we'll save about 100 million worth of budget? Which, yes, is a cynical reason to cut down a movie's runtime. But let me tell you this, I'm done with this whole auto vision approach. Sometimes a director has earned the right to have an auto vision. Okay, so Chris Nolan absolutely has earned the right. He made $1 billion with a 3-hour movie and it won Best Picture, and he earned that off the back of other massive successes, right? Greta Gerwig has earned the right to have an auto vision. Not that she has done a super long film. She knows better than that, but you know, she's worked way up through fucking I was going to say Loose Women, through Lady Bird, Little Women, and Barbie. She's earned the right to have a say on what film she wants to make and how she wants to make it, right? And there's so many other examples. But then there are other people who haven't necessarily earned that. So Ari Aster coming out with Eddington is a 3-hour film. And then this brings me on to the other point. The reason why I'm done with this culture is after hearing the interviews with Chris McQuarrie about the process of quote unquote writing the final Reckoning Mission Impossible. I've now watched so many interviews with Chris McQuarrie. I've consumed so much content about him. He's quite readily and openly saying, yeah, we didn't have the script on set a lot of the time. We shot the action without knowing where. Like, they literally shot the scene of Tom running across the bridge in London without knowing where he was running to. Just let that sink in. What? That you're filming a mission movie that is costing hundreds of millions and the studio is complicit in letting you do that without a script to the point where you're boasting about it on every fucking podcast you find yourself on. What the fuck is going on? What the fuck has happened to studios putting their foot down? It confuses me so much. And that brings me on to another point. Not only will it save budget to make tighter movies, not only does it get more eyes on the prize creatively and hopefully tightens up people like Astor and McQuarrie and Tarantino who can get a bit too big for their boots, but it might actually make more money at the box office for repeated viewing, right? We all know some of the biggest movies ever made at the box office, financially at the box office, have been the longest ones, right? Titanic, Endgame, Avatar. You know, these are long movies. So I'm not here saying that long movies don't make money. I'm here saying that those are the exceptions and not the rule. The length did not make them good, right? They suited their length because they were good movies and they were paced correctly. But long movies does not make us good movies, right? If you think about Final Reckoning and how much they wish that had made at the box office, I don't have the figure to hand, but I know that it didn't quite do the business they wanted it to do. Would I, let's just speak about me personally, have been more likely to go see Final Reckoning again and experience those stunts again, despite the other flaws, if it was a 2-hour movie and not a 3-hour movie? 100%. I even thought about it, and then I was like, I don't want to go back to a 3-hour movie, right? Sinners had a massive repeat business. People going back to see it again. That was 2 hours, 20, 30-ish, right? So it was just on that cusp of like, okay, I think I can stomach this for another viewing because I really, really enjoyed it. If movies come out at 2 hours long and are loved, and I think probably more likely to be loved if you're tightening up a fucking script that you've actually fucking written, Chris McQuarrie, you'll make more money by default as well because there'll be more repeat viewing, surely. Not only have you saved money on the budget and blah, blah, blah. And that's my final note is shortening the movie can often actually make the movie better most of the time. There are so many movies that could have done with a bit of tightening up. And it's almost like we have too much free reign on directors nowadays. And that seems to have been frittered away so quickly without anyone really noticing it or mentioning it. So The Assassination of Jesse James by the coward Robert Ford came out in 2007 and was considered a super long movie. And now it's fucking absolutely not. And I just wish that we could go back, not only creatively, for creative benefits, but for financial benefits. These studios can cynically make more profit by maybe making better films that are shorter. Fucking hell. So, anyway, a couple of bits of news, and then we're going on to the FOFSCARS. A couple of bits of news are, news has come out that Robert Eggers is going to do a Christmas Carol movie. You know, Christmas Carol has been done so many times. It's been done by the Muppets. It's been done by BBC, old BBC versions. It's been done by, what was the one? Robert Zemeckis with Jim Carrey as like, in Robert Zemeckis' kind of it's not stop motion capture animated style. I think there was a version last year with Guy Pearce in it. Anyway, it's been done so many times. It's the point where it's like it's a fable, it's folklore at this point, right? It's not just a novel. Or was it a short story? Anyway, never read it. So, and Robert Eggers doing A Christmas Carol is extremely exciting to me. And I heard some initial reaction being like, oh, it doesn't seem like a right fit. No, it is. It's a perfect fit. Think about it. It's like Robert Eggers is the perfect person to jockey that boundary between fantasy and reality, right? The grimy, dirty back streets of London that he's got almost like a fetish for London, mixed with the fantasy of the ghosts and the griminess of the ghosts as well, and like the macabre nature of taking him to see the gravestone and things like this, like, and that's fantastic. I'm so excited for that. The only downside is apparently he's looking at Willem Dafoe for the for the Scrooge role. I cannot be fucked with that. I cannot be fucked. I got pissed off with Willem Dafoe doing a British accent in Nosferatu, I think he was trying to do, and in Poor Things. He can't do a British accent. Scrooge is a classic British character. Robert Eggers is not British. I think he has some British heritage, but not British enough to understand that Willem Dafoe cannot carry off the accent of Scrooge for an entire film. And again, I've talked about accents before with Nick Frost and the Hagrid issue. I just feel very tuned into accents, and maybe you listening, that doesn't matter to you as much. For me, it's not everything, but it's a lot, right? If you're doing Scrooge, a British property, at least they don't need to be British. Just get someone who can do the London accent properly, or at least a refined London accent, which is what Scrooge is. Willem Dafoe fucking can't. So I'm so excited about this film, and I'm not saying he can't do the other aspects of the role. Of course he can, but the accent is the springboard into it, and he can't fucking do it. Pick someone else. And I was talking with my mate about it, and he said Ralph Fiennes. Fucking unbelievable. Unbelievable. Ralph Fiennes would smash that role so hard. Another bit of news, Incredibles 3's coming, and I have nothing to say about that. Brad Bird directed the first two. He's not directing the third one, but I thought it was interesting that they're doing that. Speaking of IP, Pixar going back to the well a little bit there. So yeah, moving on to the FOFSCARS, I'm going to do this bridge to the FOFSCARS by saying I've got a couple of premieres coming up. So I've got the 28 Years premiere. Yes! 28 Years premiere coming next week. And so I will have a review for you in the next episode. And then the week after that, I've got the F1 premiere. So I'll have a review for you on time for the F1 release as well. Fuck yeah, I'm so fucking buzzing. I'm buzzing. Oh, and I've got a Jurassic World... What is it called, this new one? Oh, I've forgotten. The new Jurassic film. Got a screening for that. Not the premiere, but it's like a multimedia screening for influencers and critics. Which then leads me on to finishing off. So I'll bring you all the gossip from those premieres. Did I get a Getty image? You know, that's the question. And is the movie good? Did I see any stars? Did I high five Cillian Murphy and say, "Great work in the new movie, Cillian"? And he goes, "I'm not in it." And I go, "Well, bye." Which leads me on to the Brad Pitt FOFSCARS. So the FOFSCARS. This is, like I said, my segment for awarding alternative awards to the filmography of a person or thing in film, as a way to discuss the news, right? New releases, let's say. So Brad Pitt FOFSCARS, F1's coming out soon. A new film from Joseph Kosinski. Brad Pitt playing an F1 driver. Should be fucking great. Follow up to Top Gun Maverick for Kosinski, so it should be fucking great. So let's go through these awards, and the final award, Best Movie, I put to a FOF public vote on my Instagram broadcast channel, Fred on Film. It's on my profile if you want to go find that. And so the winner of the winning movie of Best Brad Pitt Movie will be determined by you. So most rewatchable. Oh, by the way, Brad Pitt has got a very long and esteemed filmography. You know, everything from Thelma and Louise, The River Runs Through It, Interview with the Vampire, fucking Ocean's 11, Mr. and Mrs. Smith, all the way through the era to Jesse James, like we say, going through to Moneyball, Big Short, and looking, I was actually like, I actually wonder if I was underrating Brad Pitt's filmography, Like, when you look at it, it's actually head and shoulders above his compatriots of, like, I don't know, who would you say? George Clooney, even Matt Damon. It's not far off Leo DiCaprio, Leo DiCaprio's probably got a more consistent hit rate. But in terms of actual number of hits, spread across the entire time, Brad Pitt's probably there. Like, it's quite underrated. And I don't know why, but I was surprised by that. But when you see it all in its totality, it's quite impressive. Me saying Brad Pitt's filmography is impressive. Yeah, good criticism, Fred. So, most rewatchable movie. For me, I was choosing between two: Moneyball and Big Short. Moneyball is the movie written by what the fuck is his name? The guy who constantly is writing zippy dialogue. Oh my god, I know you're listening. You know his name, and I can't fucking remember it. What's his fucking name? Oh my god, shall I look it up? Oh my god, I'm gonna look it up. Aaron Sorkin. Yes. Written by Aaron Sorkin, all about like the data approach to building a perfect baseball team. And I find it so rewatchable because I just love the data side of it. Jonah Hill talking about, he gets on base 2.3% and all this, blah, blah, blah. And it's easy watching. You can engage with it, or you can let it wash over you if you've seen it before. It's light and engaging at the same time. And then we've got Big Short, which I've given the award to. Most rewatchable for me is Big Short. Brad Pitt has a semi-cameo in that, really. He's kind of like a humdrum investor who helps these two young investors like win big on the stock market crash. And one of my favorite films of all time. That fun fact. It's not really one that would normally be in my favorite films because it's quite flashy. It's got that kind of post Wolf of Wall Street-y kind of aesthetic where everything's a bit like off the wall, a bit quirky. They go to Margot Robbie in a bubble bath to tell us about the stock market and all this, and it's all a bit kind of like, it's a bit crass, it's not normally my type of thing, but I think it's very rewatchable and very funny. So that's my one. The one that doesn't fit. This is the movie in Brad Pitt's filmography that doesn't fit. So it doesn't really suit him, or it just doesn't go alongside the rest of his style, right? Happy Feet 2. Apparently, he voices some shit in that, and I've never fucking seen it. Babel, which is a film that is one of the most depressing films I've ever seen. I can't remember the director's name, and it was made in that kind of 2005 to 2010 era where Brad Pitt was really trying stuff out. And it's just so somber and awful. But do you know what I've actually given this to again? It's The Big Short again, the one that doesn't fit. Do you know why? Because he plays such a, like I say, cameo, side character, humdrum character. He's got none of the, I guess, you don't want to say charisma, but he's not the main guy, right? He's actually, his whole character is wanting to blend into the wallpaper, and that performance is quite unusual and doesn't fit for me. And then I've got Swing and a Hit and Swing and a Miss. So this is when they try something a bit out there and it works, or when they try something a bit out there and it didn't work. Swing and a Hit is Inglourious Bastards. And I think if I was to do one FOFSCARS for Quentin Tarantino, that would be his Swing and a Hit too. To make a film about Nazism, where one of the main characters is a Nazi that is relatively charismatic, but also obviously menacing and horrendous. Where Brad Pitt is doing like a way caricatured, over the top American, what is he, a general, would you say? Colonel or whatever. And like where there's a made up almost fan fiction ending where the Nazis get burnt to death in a cinema is actually is a fucking crazy. I mean, I'm sure Brad Pitt trusted the project because Quentin Tarantino was at the helm, but it's actually fucking nuts that worked. Do you know what I mean? And all props to Quentin, because I'm not a massive fan of his personally all the time, but fair play. Him and Brad Pitt really got that one done. Swing and a miss. One option, I've got three options. One option would be The Curious Case of Benjamin Button. I feel like Brad Pitt was high flying at this point in his career. Again, I think it was 2006-ish. And maybe 2008. And it was a David Fincher movie. And it didn't do very well and at the box office. And I actually, looking back at it, I don't think is very good to memory of last giving it a go. And it's so weird because at that point, David Fincher was pretty much at the top of his game. I think that was just after Zodiac. And so was Brad Pitt. So I don't know what the fuck happened there, but I don't know if the script is right. And the way David Fincher did it, he was kind of getting into his digitization of his aesthetic so much. It did look a bit plastic almost. And there was obviously CGI involved because you have to kind of de-age and then re-age Brad Pitt. But yeah, something didn't quite work for me about that. But I haven't given Swing and a Miss to that. And I also haven't given Swing and a Miss to Bullet Train because I think that just kind of got frittered into history as like, do you know what? It was an Apple TV film, I think. It was one of the streamers. Didn't quite work. Whatever. Him and Aaron Taylor-Johnson kind of action movie on a fast-moving train. The Swing and a Miss, I think, is Troy. So Troy is the Wolfgang Peterson movie that came out 2004. Again, peak Brad Pitt. And it was a fucking flop. And it was around a similar time that Alexander was also a flop, which was a film with Colin Farrell in it, directed by Oliver Stone. And it was this kind of post-Gladiator swords and sandals resurgence. And just none of them really worked. Maybe Kingdom of Heaven sort of worked. But Troy flopped. Alexander flopped. And I think that was a big swing from Brad Pitt at the height of his fame and stardom. And it just didn't fucking work. The main memory I have from Troy is my sister coming home from watching it at the cinema and saying she saw Brad Pitt's bum. She was like, I saw his bum, because she fancied him, obviously. Most underrated. We've talked about Assassination of Jesse James by the coward Robert Ford. I actually wouldn't say that's underrated. I would just say it's underseen, right? Which is sort of a different thing. I would say The Tree of Life would probably be my option. That's the movie directed by wow, we're listening to me thinking of directors a lot in this episode, aren't we? Terrence Malick, and it's when Terrence Malick really started to go off the fucking rails with his kind of nutty existential movie making, where like there isn't really a script, there isn't really a plot. They're just kind of running around, and it's more of like it's almost like a montage that you see in the Tate Gallery, but for 3 hours. You know what I mean? Anyway, I told you before I worked at a cinema, and I worked at a cinema when this came out, and I saw this a few times, 3 or 4 times. And again, similar to when I said about watching Predators 7 times, I did go through a bit of imposter syndrome with Tree of Life, where I ended up really loving it. Like once in that 4th time, I'd let it wash over me fully. It was really quite transcendent experience, and I think it is a bit underrated, and I think it's probably underseen as well, but underrated because I think people do get a bit sick of the Terrence Malick shtick. Best scene, easy win. So this is like, for me, I'm categorizing this as like, what scene is most indelible on his career, or for me on his career? I think it's the what's in the box scene from 7, right? What's in the box? What's in the box? Holding the gun up, bringing it down. I think Brad nails his performance. He nails the delivery of what is quite a ludicrous line, right? What's in the box? What's in the box? And that line has been memeified so much since. And yet, when you watch the film and you watch the scene in the context of the film, the scene holds up. Brad Pitt's performance holds up, and I think it's one of his earlier performances in terms of his proper up and coming period. But it fucking slaps. Best hair, Troy. And a shout out for Ocean's 11 because he had that kind of stuck up spiky hair that people had in the end of the 90s and early 90s, and he fucking carries it off and it looks fucking great. The role he should have played. So I looked up some roles that he got nearly cast for, and I've got 3. We've got Patrick Bateman in American Psycho. By the way, there's news that Patrick Schwarzenegger, I mentioned earlier, is going to play Patrick Bateman in the new Luca Guadagnino version of American Psycho. Luca Guadagnino is one of my favourite directors. He did Suspiria, the new version. He did Bones and All, one of my favourite films ever. And Patrick Schwarzenegger from, from fucking White Lotus is a perfect choice to play Bateman. And I heard a quote this morning which really resonated with me, which is American Psycho is a film that Luca Guadagnino can bring a lot to, and also is a great film, but it isn't sacred enough that you can't touch it. So as remake options go, it's actually a good one. So yeah, Brad Pitt nearly got cast as Patrick Bateman in American Psycho, but Christian Bale got it instead. As Jason Bourne, but Matt Damon got it instead. And as Neo in The Matrix, obviously Keanu Reeves got that instead. Out of those 3, I think Patrick Bateman probably wouldn't be as suited to Brad because he's better at a kind of chilled out role. And Patrick Bateman's got to be a bit crazy, wacky, and Christian Bale smashed it. Jason Bourne, he could have done Jason Bourne because initially it is quite a bland character, and Brad Pitt is kind of good at bland. But then again, I don't know if Brad Pitt is as believable with kind of like everyman action, like hand-to-hand combat. Matt Damon looks more like a normal bloke. And Brad Pitt is so handsome. He's so clearly a star. I don't know if the balance for that character would have worked right. Neo in The Matrix is my choice. I love The Matrix, and Keanu Reeves in The Matrix is brilliant. But I think he's brilliant because his bland line delivery suits the mechanism of the story, like the artificial nature of the story. He's not brilliant because he's actually brilliant. I don't think that's what the character was supposed to be like, right? And I think The Matrix is almost brilliant in spite of that. And so I think that this might be heresy to say, but I think you probably could exchange Keanu Reeves for another actor in The Matrix, and The Matrix would still be as good. And I'll tell you one thing, Brad Pitt would have looked just as good in those fucking sunglasses. So, yeah, again, that might be heresy to say, but I think Brad Pitt could have done Neo in The Matrix. Peak Brad. I like this way I've encapsulated this award now. I forgot how I did it for Danny Boyle, but Peak Brad is like, when was Brad at his most powerful in Hollywood in terms of his skill set, box office, culturally, even physically if you want, like everything. I've put Mr. and Mrs. Smith, okay? He looked incredible. The movie isn't that good, but it was still fucking fun because he was in it. Off the back of that, him and Angelina Jolie form probably the most famous Hollywood couple of all time, one that still resonates through Hollywood to this day if they're seen in the same room. Yeah, like I say, it was a fun film. His performance was good. He had his Ocean's 11 charisma dialed up to 11, and he could have pretty much done any project he wanted at that point. And I think he fucking was, to be fair, because that was the era of Benjamin Button and Troy, aforementioned, not that good. But yeah, no, Mr. and Mrs. Smith is a real good achievement, decent film done by someone at the height of their powers, elevating what probably wouldn't have been that great of a film. Best performance. Speaking of Ocean's 11, I'm going to give it to Ocean's 11. I think you could shout out Moneyball again. You could shout out his cameo in True Romance, where he's like, can you get some cleaning products? He's like the stoner on the bed, on the sofa for a couple of scenes. You could shout out 12 Monkeys even, which is not a film I love, but he does do quite a epileptic performance in that, which is interesting. You could even shout out Jesse James again, where he does kind of play the reserved mystique of Jesse James really well. But but I'm giving it to Ocean's 11, similar to why I just gave it to Mr. and Mrs. Smith. I think Ocean's 11 encapsulates, and Fight Club in a way, but I'm going to give it Ocean's, encapsulates that kind of jittery ball of energy that Brad Pitt can do so well. Because there's so often he plays a very laid-back character, like I say. Everything from Thelma and Louise through Big Short, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, and True Romance. He does that bland, laid-back character well. But I think he's at his best when he's doing that kind of hyperactive, comedic, not hyperactive, but like energetic, semi-comedic, jittery, cool, charismatic guy that you could see in the Ocean's movies. And what's another good example? I mean, maybe there isn't another great example. Maybe that's why it's his best. I just think he encapsulated a version of Brad in Ocean's 11 that to me was, I mean, there is no better way to put it. Best performance. Best movie. And I'm going to conjoin this with most overrated. Because for me, most overrated is what has won best movie. I'll say that again so I can cut it up for a short. For me, the most overrated Brad Pitt film is what you voted as the best Brad Pitt film. Okay? And the answer to both those things, therefore, is Fight Club. I put the vote to my broadcast channel. Fight Club won. It beat what would be my choice, which was Seven. Okay, Seven's one of my favourite films of all time. And as I went onto that broadcast channel and asked, what's in the box? What's in the box? I opened the box and found that you'd voted for Fight Club to be his best film ever. Huge fan of Brad. Huge fan of David Fincher. And I realise I'm in the minority on this, but as we discussed last week, I'm allowed to have my opinion, you're allowed to have yours, and let's discuss. I don't like Fight Club because I think it's a symptom of the cool early noughties trend of like over visualization. You know, those kind of CGI shots that David Fincher was doing at the time, and also it's kind of overly coolified. It's like it's just way too cool. It wants to be cool. It's hard for me to explain. It's almost like that Pulp Fiction syndrome of like it was written to be cool, and that gives me the ick, you know. But Brad Pitt looks fucking incredible. He's got abs for days, and I'm definitely in the minority. Look, you guys voted it. Fight Club is Brad Pitt's best movie, according to the FOFSCARS. Looking down the votes, by the way, I put like a pretty exhaustive list of Brad Pitt movies thinking, no one's going to pick this, no one's going to pick this. Even Babel got a fucking vote. Even Babel got one vote. It was pretty, I mean, the top five was Fight Club, Seven, Inglourious Basterds, Mr. and Mrs. Smith. Mr. and Mrs. Smith kind of overperformed there, I think, and Snatch, fair enough. But I think that's pretty tough on Ocean's 11, Moneyball, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. But do you know what that just goes to? And The Big Short. But you know what that just goes to show? Unreal filmography, right? Like we said at the top. Brad Pitt, his filmography slaps. I've just named like 10 movies there that in anyone else's filmography, maybe their best. Absolutely their best. And he's got 10 of them. And I don't know if I really appreciated Brad Pitt as much as I should before looking into this. He's insane. So thanks for joining me for the FOFSCARS. My eyes are watering. I've talked that much. I'm going lightheaded. Thanks for joining me for the FOFSCARS. Thanks for joining me for FOF in general. If you watch on YouTube, have a listen. Apple Podcasts, Spotify. If you haven't listened, go watch on YouTube at Fred Asquith YT. God, I'm so fucking lightheaded. I need to find a way to stop. I feel like I'm going to pass out. Yes, and I will see you next time with a 28 years premiere review and film review, and a Jurassic World. I might even have a Jurassic World review next time. I think my screening's next week. God, that'll be a bit early, won't it? Anyway, thanks for joining me. Ta-ra.